Excellent. So now we are bang on time, which makes me very happy, and I know it makes tech guys very happy, to introduce our keynote speaker. And I know he's popped up because Steph just said hello to him. So Wilfred Emmanuel Jones, the Black Farmer, I can ask you to unmute your microphone if you haven't already. And I'm going to hand over to you if that's all right.
Could you hear me?
Perfectly well.
Great. So do you want me to start now then?
Please do. Thank you so much, Wilfred.
Okay, well, thank you very, very much for inviting me. Now, I understand that I've got about 30 minutes. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to talk for about 15 to 20 minutes and then leave the rest of the time for any questions and answers. Because when I do this sort of stuff, that's what I tend to find is that people like to ask some questions. And in my talk, I'm going to break it up into 3 sections. I'm really going to tell the audience a little bit about me, then tell them how I built my brand, The Black Farmer, and then really look at the opportunities that are available to us in the next 10 years. I fundamentally believe that the next 10 years is going to be really exciting for anybody who's thinking about starting up in business. I'll take my glasses off actually, because I'm starting to see I look like Stevie Wonder. Okay. So let's go right back to the beginning. Now, I was born in Jamaica, and I was born in a place called Clarendon, Frankfield. So for those of you who don't know the island, that part of Jamaica is very rural. And I've always said that I have sort of farming in my blood, as it were. And I think what a lot of people don't understand, in fact, is that in the 1950s, when people like my parents had an opportunity to come to the UK, they came from rural communities. And they really had farming and living in a rural environment in their blood. But actually, when they came to the UK, they went to where the work was, and that tended to be in the big cities and urban centres. In my case, my parents moved to Birmingham, and I was brought up in a place called Small Heath in Birmingham. Now, I don't know if any of your listeners are from Birmingham, but if they are, what I'm about to say is going to seriously piss them off, because actually the part of Birmingham that I'm from was a bit of a shithole. I have absolutely no fond memories about the place. It was the pits. And I'm 62 years old now, and you could tell that it had such an impact on me that I still feel pretty negative about it. It's one of those classic inner city areas that's devoid of hope, devoid of opportunity. It's the goddamn pits. Now, I'm from a family of 11, and there were 11 of us who were brought up in those classic 2 up, 2 down terrace houses, and we were very poor. And because we were so poor, my father had an allotment, and it was my job as the oldest boy to look after this allotment. And I loved being on this allotment because, in a sense, it was an oasis away from the misery that I was surrounded by. And I absolutely loved it, really loved being in this environment. And this is the important bit of my story. And when I go around and I do these talks, I really emphasize this bit, what I'm about to say. And I particularly emphasize it to young people. I remember at the age of 11, I was 11 years old, and I made myself a promise that one day I would own my own farm. Now, I didn't know I was going to do it, but it was a dream that I lodged in the back of my mind, and then everything that I subsequently did with my life, which I'm going to talk to you about, it was to try and fulfill that dream. Now, in the UK, when we talk about having a dream, the British tend to be quite cynical. You know, the idea of dreaming that you could actually achieve things well above the status in which you were born doesn't seem to ring as much in the UK as it does in America. It's an American ideal. But I say this to people: look, you're never going to achieve it if you do not have the courage to dream. So the first starting place in anything that you want to have is the courage to dream. And dreaming is all about having the audacity to feel and believe you could be whatever you want to be. We live in societies that they try and crush audacity, but audacity is what it's all about. Anyhow, put the dream back in my head. Now, I went to, in those days they were called secondary moderns. I went to the local secondary modern school in Birmingham. And this school was as much as a shithole as the place that I was sort of living in. The teachers hated being there. The kids hated being there. It was a pit. And actually, they didn't really school us. They, in a sense, policed us, because they didn't really expect that much will happen to people from that sort of background. And in truth, a lot of those kids who went to that school ended up in society's dustbin heap, ended up in prison, not really achieving much with their lives. And that is pretty tragic. Now, I was a really difficult student when I was at school. And one of the great problems that I had was that I'm dyslexic. And in those days, you can imagine, people just did have no idea about dyslexia. I mean, even today, people are still pretty cagey. They don't really understand what dyslexia means, especially for those people who are working in the educational system. There's a long way they've got to go in terms of getting a grip and understanding what dyslexia actually means. So being dyslexic, being black, being a pain in the ass, I left school at the age of 16. I could hardly read and write, and everybody thought this guy is destined to end up in society's dustbin heap. So I wanted to get away from home, and the only way I could get away from home was to join the army. Now, if you are a 16-year-old black guy with attitude, not very well disciplined, and you decide to join the army, not only decide to join the army, but you decide to join the parachute regiment, but the whole thing about being in the army or being in the services is that you're there to take orders, you're there to do as you're told. If you've got any element of entrepreneurial spirit about you, army and entrepreneurialism do not go together. One thing is to do exactly as you're told. The other thing is to challenge everything that you've been told. So you can imagine what's going to happen next. So they took about a year to try and lick me into shape, and they gave up, you know, because in those days, if you were a black guy in the army and you were lippy, you were going to get your head kicked in. And you can imagine, I got my head kicked in. So after about a year, they decided to chuck me out of the army. So the first qualification I've ever had to my name was a dishonorable discharge from the army. So I'm about 18 years old, you know, thick as shit, getting kicked out of the army and destined to sort of be one of life's losers. And in those days, if you were a failure at everything, everybody was scratching their head thinking, well, what the hell could they do with him? And so in those days, if you were just rubbish, they would say, oh, send him into catering. So I then went to the local catering college in Halesowen in the West Midlands. And luckily, I absolutely took to working in the food industry. I loved cooking. So, and this was the days actually before catering and cooking was a glamorous profession. It was way before the cult of the celebrity chefs. And so I ended up working in various restaurants, hotels, nothing glamorous, but I managed to sort of make a living, keep up the streets. Now, even though I had a job and it was sustaining me, the dream I had, that dream that I had was always there reminding me, well, boy, if you think you're going to actually buy a farm, you ain't going to do that flipping burgers. So I always knew that I had to do something in order to elevate myself and able to earn money, because what tends to happen in the farming industry is that farms are passed down through generations. So people don't need to go and find vast amounts of money to actually buy land. So now this is going to be an interesting twist to my story. And it goes along the lines, if anybody wants to find out more about my philosophy in life, they must get hold of the book that I've recently written called Jeopardy, The Danger of Playing It Safe. And so I remember at that time when I was flipping burgers thinking, well, I need to do something to sort of elevate my position. And at the time, there used to be a very famous BBC documentary series on called 40 Minutes. They used to make social documentaries. And I thought, God, you know, I would like to go and work in television as a producer director making films. Now, you can imagine that when I told my family and friends that, hey, I want to go into BBC and make television films, they looked at me and thought, this guy's nuts, because A, he could hardly read and write. B, television is very much the profession for the Oxbridge type. This is a guy who is off his rocker. But this is, again, another, if you want to take notes about what I'm saying, this is a really another noteworthy thing to put down. This is my fundamental belief in life. It doesn't matter on your background. It doesn't matter on your education. It doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't matter what gender you are. You only need two things to achieve anything that you want in life. And any successful person will have these two things. And if you actually focus on these two things, you'll be amazing how life opens up to you. Okay, the first one. The first thing is that you have to be ruthlessly focused. Ruthlessly focused. And what I mean by that is that you're able to get rid of that white noise of living. You'd be amazed how much we are distracted by everyday living. And then when you actually focus it down, most of the things that we are distracted by doesn't really actually matter. Now, the people who are really successful are the people who are really good at tunnel vision and ruthless focus. That is the most important. First of all, that is a very important thing. Now, the second thing, in fact, is more important than the first. You can have the first, but if you don't have the second thing, you will not achieve your dreams. And the second is that you need to be passionate. Passionate. Because what passion does is that it defies reason. It defies logic. It helps you get over all of the hurdles that life will throw in your way. Passion. And everybody says to me, well, what do you mean by that? Well, we've all been in love. And we all know that when we are in love, we defy all reason, all logic, all things that are sensible, because we feel driven. That is fundamentally saying, that's what you need to tap into, that whatever idea, it doesn't matter what obstacles going, you are so focused and driven to pursue it. That is the things you need to achieve what you want in life. So taking those two bits of philosophy, I decided, right, I'm going to do everything it takes to get into the BBC. So I wrote to every single producer, director you could think of, and there were hundreds and hundreds of them. And as you can imagine, none of them answered my letters. Okay, so I wouldn't give up then. So I thought, right, I'm going to ring them. Nobody would take my phone calls. I thought, right, I'm not going to give up then. Now, at the time, I was living in Birmingham, and they used to have Pebble Studios in Birmingham. So I went up to the security guards, whose job it was to let people in and out of the buildings. And they had these manual barriers that somebody would always have to get out of the bloody hut and open. So I went to them and I said, look, I'll do that for you. You don't have to pay me. I will do that. And so they, some black guy who's stupid enough to be opening the barrier through all sorts of weather, they jumped at the opportunity because it meant they could then sit in their shiny cabins. So I did that for about a year. Then I got to meet the cleaners. And the cleaners who used to go into the offices to clean the offices. And I said, look, can I come and then help you clean the offices? And again, some guy doing it, to help them out, they obviously jumped at the opportunity. And then when I was cleaning, I met a guy, and I still remember this guy's name to this day. He said, I met a guy called Jock Gallagher. And he said, I told him what I wanted to do and all that sort of stuff. So he told me to come to his office, and he spoke to me for about an hour. And he said, look, you are not the sort of person that we employ in TV because, A, you don't have the education, and B, you do have a bit of an attitude problem. You're not the sort of person that we'd employ. And he said this, he said, I don't know why, but I'm going to take a chance with you. I'm going to give you a 3-month contract as a runner and then see what happens. Now, another important thing is this. I say to people, look out for your guardian angels. those people who are around, who are going to be there to give you a break, to give you a chance to fulfill the very things that you want to do. And everything I've ever achieved, there's been what I call those guardian angels who come out of the woodwork to help me on the ladder to achievement. And you only find those guardian angels if you're prepared to put out there your dreams, your aspirations, the things that you want to achieve. Now, that man, having the courage to give me a break, then started off a very long career in television, and I'm extremely grateful for him, because I would never have got in through the conventional routes of CVs, interviews, and all that sort of shite. I just wouldn't have got past the word go. So I spent, so it's worth pausing here, because you've got a guy from the ghetto suddenly working in television, you know, as a producer director. And at the time I worked on a program that was very, very popular. It was called the Food and Drink Program. And that was a program that really launched the careers of some of the big name celebrity chefs. I, for example, gave people like Gordon Ramsay his first break in television. I directed him. Most of the celebrity chefs that you know, I was the person that directed them. Now, this is a guy from the gutter working in the BBC. I was at the BBC for 15 years, traveling the world, making food programs. And you would think, whoa, this boy has done pretty well. You know, you need to put your head down and thank your blessings and don't sort of ruffle the feathers. But the dream that I had, that dream that I had was always there to make sure I did not get lazy. I did not actually succumb to mediocrity. I did not succumb to actually just being comfortable. So I was getting on then by age, and I thought, well, boy, if you're going to buy your farm, you're going to have to get your arse in gear, because, you know, you're running out of time, and you're running out of time fast. And one of the reasons why I wrote this book, Jeopardy, the Danger of Playing It Safe, is that actually a lot of people think, well, why would you leave something as secure as a BBC to then go and do something that is totally new, go into this massive uncertainty? And one of the things that I think coronavirus has taught people, all of those people who believed in certainty, if there's one thing that coronavirus has taught you, is that actually certainty does not exist. That actually the only thing that we can do is to make a friend of uncertainty. And if we're able to make a friend of uncertainty, it opens up phenomenal opportunities. So having been at the BBC for 15 years, I thought, well, I ain't going to make the money that I need to be able to buy my farm, so I'm going to have to leave the BBC and set up my own food and drink marketing agency. And I left the BBC without any money. I only had enough money to pay the mortgage for 3 months. Then after 3 months, I would have run out of money. Most people would never, ever have actually taken that leap of faith, because they would be terrified, you know. And I think that the thing I find quite saddening is that there's lots of people out there that would love to do different things, to love to change their life. But the one thing that's stopping them is fear, fear. Now, coronavirus has been a fantastic teacher about how we actually should learn to manage fear. So I decided to set up a food and drink marketing agency, and there's nothing like that focuses the mind more than knowing you've only got enough money to pay the mortgage for 3 months, because after 3 months, then that will be it. And so I decided, well, I'm going to go out and I'm going to try and get as much clients as possible. And again, I was lucky enough to find the right people who would give me the opportunity to start my company. So I was responsible for launching brands like Lloyd Grossman Sauces, Kettle Chips, Plymouth Gin, Cobra Beer, really big established brands now, but back in the day, they were the challenger brands coming from nowhere. I ran that business again for about 15 years, and then that gave me the money to buy my farm. So I say to people out there, dream early, because it takes a fucking long time to achieve your dreams. It took me nearly 35 years to get into a position to buy my farm. And so I decided to buy my farm in Devon, because I used to go down there on holiday quite a lot. And then what was really interesting about when I decided to buy my farm, everybody couldn't compute. He said, all my friends up in London says, a black guy, why are you going down to the West Country? Don't they lynch black people down there? And then when I was down in Devon, farmers and the locals just thinking, why would a black guy want to come down and into farming country? Is it a cover for growing drugs? So the moment you define stereotypes, it causes sort of confusions. But little do they know, I didn't give a shit about what anybody was saying. What I wanted to do was to fulfill my dream of having my own farm. So, having bought the farm, and one of the things that I noticed was this big divide between urban and rural Britain. And I said, oh, right, now there's an opportunity to develop a brand, develop a product that would actually help to bridge those two communities. So I decided, right, I'm going to do something, a quintessentially British product, and which is a sausage. And then I just said, right, I'm going to do something that was going to appeal to a fringe community, because I did some research and I said it's something like 1 in 100 people had some sort of wheat intolerance. So I thought, right, I'm going to do a gluten-free product. I found a manufacturer that was going to make the things for me. And then the next thing was to come up with a brand name. And I was scratching my head thinking, what the hell am I going to call this brand? And one day it came to me. All of my next door neighbors down in Devon used to call me the Black Farmer. And I thought, shit, you know, man, that's a bloody good idea. It's a really good name. Not only is it a good name, but no one else there could nick the idea because there was no black farmers. And also it has an edge to it. People are not too sure about whether it's politically correct. They're not too sure about, you know, what is the sort of correct language to use. And if you're doing marketing, that is a sweet spot where people are curious that you need to hit. So having come up with a brand name, I thought, this is what I'm going to do. I just need to do one thing just to make sure I'm not going to be causing myself some big problems. I decided I would research the name. And all the research then came back and says, do not use the Black Farmer because people will be offended. All the research came back and said that. Now, there's a very important lesson here as well. And it is this. Research will tell you what happened yesterday. Research will tell you what's happening today. But research cannot tell you what people are thinking and feeling in the future. And in this age that we're living, where everybody is focused on data, on the research, on evidence, what it does, it gets in the way of vision. Because visionaries are people who are able to see the world as it will be in 10, 15 years, rather than it is now. So when you listen to all the governments talking about we're back in the science and we're all going behind the science, and what everybody respects is rational reasoning, there's a vital mistake that's being made, because actually change comes from those who are able to see another world. And so therefore, we must not be too reliant on research. It has its place, but in this age we live in, it's far too dominant in terms of what people decide not to do and what to do. So I went out and I went to all of the supermarkets to see whether they would list the products, and every one of the supermarkets said no, weren't interested. Now, I launched my brand at another big revolution in the global history, and it was the start of the internet boom. Facebook had just started. All the social medias, as we know today, did not exist. Then actually, the moment that the internet and Facebook started to come about, what it then did is that it enabled people to have a direct relationship with their customer. Before that, you had to go through the gatekeepers, which were TV, radio advertising, newspapers, magazines. That's the only way you could communicate with your consumer. What the internet has done, and it's going to be even more so in the age that we live in, it has offered everybody to contact directly with their consumers. Look at what we're doing now. God's sake, we're all in different places and we'll be able to connect. This is a fantastic new world that we're in. And that's why I'm so excited by it, because when we started the Black Farmer brand 15 years ago, we were the first people just to put the social media logos on our packaging. It was seen to be really revolutionary at the time. And I just think that the next 10 years is going to be phenomenal. I don't, for example, think that things like supermarkets will exist in the way they exist in the next 10 years, because it does not make sense. So I went to all of the supermarkets. They all said no. So I said, right. And this is one of the reasons I said yes to doing this particular talk here. I said, I'm going to go around the country and I'm going to go to all of the county shows, all of the local shows, and get people to sample my products. And at the same time as they are sampling my products, because I went to the Lincolnshire Show as well, a couple of times to do that, as well as them sampling my products, on my website, I had all the names of all the buyers from each supermarket, their phone numbers, their addresses, which was something you didn't do. But I said, fuck it, if you're a David, you don't have to play by the rules. So I decided, right, I said to people, if you really like these products, just write to the supermarkets or ring them and demand that they list their products. And as God is my witness, that's how I got my listing, the power of the consumer. And what I say to people is that you should always look after your consumer, because if you look after them, they would really, really protect you. Now, we're in all of the supermarkets now. The brand is 15 years old. We've gone from sausages to doing chickens to doing eggs. We're doing a variety of products. On the 1st of August, and you are the first people to know, I announced it on the interview I did locally today. On the 1st of August, we are going to have a Black Farmer farm shop that's going to be going online, where we're going to be selling about 120 products. Now, the reason why I'm really rushing to do that is because I fundamentally believe that localization, small, is going to be the future. And so anybody who wants to think about new opportunities for the next 10 years, it's all going to be about localizations. For the last couple of decades, people have been scratching their heads thinking, what are we going to do with our town centers? I believe because so many people are now going to be working from home, because we've now realized that it's a nonsense that people are traveling 4 hours a day just to go into a bloody brick box, that they could work more effectively from home. What are those people going to do when in their lunch breaks? What are they going to do in the evenings? Is that they're going to be in a situation where they can actually communicate sort of more locally. So the big sell is localization, localization, localization. I'm going to stop here because I've been whittling for so long, so I don't even know if I've run out of time or not. But shall I just pause there?
Yeah, that was brilliant. Thank you so much, Wilfred. I kept laughing. I'm glad I was on mute, because every time you said a swear, I was like, so naughty. And we're going to open up, actually. I think if people have got questions, if you want to just indicate on the chat or wave. But I was going to ask what your advice for the next generation was, but you've already kicked it off with localization. So if anybody else has a question, if you want to unmute yourselves, see if people were reaching for it now. Anybody's got any questions? You did such a good job. They're all pausing now to think of something really clever.
All right.
I liked the book that you mentioned. Can you just remind me what the title was again?
Okay, so I wrote a book called, one of the reasons why I wrote this book is called Jeopardy, The Danger of Playing It Safe. Because 7 years ago, I nearly died. And I nearly died because I had acute myeloid leukemia. And you know, that is a bit of a death sentence, that is. And it's a long story, but you know, I was in hospital for a year. And again, there's nothing that focuses you on more than knowing that you may have died. So it gives you an opportunity to evaluate your life and to focus on what you want. And by writing this book, I wanted to give people some ideas of my philosophy in terms of what we need to do in order to you know, gain peace, happiness, contentment, because we live in a world where everybody has been told what they should do, what they shouldn't do. But I'm a great believer is that people could actually just tap into that, the idea that all they need is audacity, belief in self. Fundamentally, that's all you need to achieve anything.
I like it. I've got a question here from Chris. If you want to unmute yourself, Chris.
Morning, Wilfred. I could listen to you all day, actually. The one question I've got, I'd like to ask. I was really fascinated by your point around research, actually, where you said research can tell you what's in the past, what's happening now, but can't tell you what's happening in the future. But given that you'd done the research, what do you put it down to that you decided to follow your gut? Like, what was your process around that?
Well, what I think is this, is that we live in an age where I think sort of psychologists call the information age. So when people were educated, they were all educated to become computers, really. So they're able to gather information and then it's what they call sort of left brain and right brain thinkers. So most jobs, solicitors, barristers, bankers, are all very left brain orientated, which means it's all about evidence. Now, because I was not very good in those, what I then had is a highly evolved right brain, which is about instinct, about creativity, about trusting your gut. Now, as we go from the information age, because, you know, computers could do most things that those people were trained and went to have long educations for, we'll have a future where nurses will be more important than doctors. All doctors are a series of information, and then come, you know, say, right, do this from all the information they gather. Now, computers will be able to do that, but computers can't give love and care. Computers can't sense a human being's mode. And I also think that the future is going to belong to those people who are good in that sort of conceptual age, who trust their gut, who actually see that their instincts are equally as important as their IQ. And so luckily, because I'm thick in the sense of sort of formal education, everything that I've had to do and developed over the years is that emotional intelligence, that gut feel. And also, what I talk about in my book is that the greatest challenge that most people have in life is to make a decision about whether they want to be or belong. And you could never, ever achieve anything if you want to belong. Because the moment you want to belong, you then have to adhere to the rules of the group. And the group have its rules of what can be done, what's permissible, what isn't. To be, you're on your own, and the group are wanting to get you and knock you down. A great example I'll give of this is that, let's say a young boy is gay, and he knows that his mom and dad will object, they'd have a problem with it. That boy will have to make a fundamental decision. He has to decide, in order to belong, he's got to keep his true identity a secret, or does he have the courage to be, which might mean he'd be rejected by his parents. Now, part of being entrepreneurial is also crossing that bridge, because the moment you put it out there, the moment you put it in the ring, you're going to have all the critics, all the fear mongers around you pointing fingers, ready for you to fall, because you have to fall to enable their lives to be in value. And then if you do not fall, you're then worshipped as some sort of hero, this mega god. But that's what it's about. You have to make a decision, get in the ring, put it out there, and everybody, all those fearmongers are waiting for you to fall. So in terms of that question about actually understanding that research, there are many people who work in organizations, which is all about making us fearful. And that you could only achieve things if you conquer fear. And part of what actually creates fear is uncertainty. Now, why in God's name are people frightened of something which is inevitable, which is that life is uncertain? Befriend it. But there are many, many professions that build on, oh, this might happen, or that might happen, or this might happen. Yes, it might. But, you know, if you waste energy on all of those sorts of things, you can't do that fundamental thing that I said, which is focus and passion.
Thank you very much, both of you. Got another question, I think Brian Milne.
Hiya, thank you. I'm Brian Milne, Wilfred, from Black Lives Matter, Lincolnshire.
How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm fine, thanks, Wilfred. What led me to set up Black Lives Matter Lincolnshire was about 18 months ago, I set up an event with Lord Andrew Adonis. He come to Lincolnshire to do a talk for us. And some of the people, we invited several of the people from the mosques, and they were scared to come to the event in case the mosque got targeted or they got targeted personally, which got me into racism in a big way to see what impact it was having on their lives. And I spoke to various friends of mine that from the BME community and also the LGBT plus community, and listening to what they had to say was very daunting actually. And I got together with 3 of my colleagues and was like, we're going to have to do something about this now. I set up Black Lives Matter Lincolnshire and we've had some protests in Lincoln as well as Cleethorpes, and we're spreading out around the county. But what we're going to do now is we're going to try to get into the schools as well to do a bit of education. So to have like speakers from the BEME community, LGBT plus. So if people are gay, bisexual, heterosexual, and they want to speak out, we're encouraging them to give them the voice to speak out, because everybody should be treated equally and everybody should be treated fairly. And
okay. So what is the question?
yeah, what I was wanting to ask is, would you be in contact with? Could you be in contact with us to speak?
Okay. So this is what I think about the Black Lives Matter thing, because for me, it is another Me Too moment.
Yes.
If we go back, several months ago, when there was this recognition that women have had to suffer indignities that they've had to sort of keep secret. Now, the same thing applies for a person of color. Many things I could sort of cite as happened to me because of the sort of color of my skin. So at the moment, there is a real good opportunity, because actually this issue has now become top of the agenda, rather than what used to happen in the past is that it's bottom of the agenda. But the key thing is this, is that what I'm saying to everybody who is out there campaigning for something which is just and important, is that change will only come if we take our white brothers and sisters with us. And if we don't do that, things like knocking down goddamn statues and all that is just, you have a quick high to achieve what? And that what I am really, interested in is this, is that there is a lot of people, white people, who really do want to reevaluate, to think, to consider. We need to make sure that we don't come up with bloody extremist nonsense that's going to make any sane person going to say, look, these people have just become a sort of crazy fringe group. That is wasting an opportunity. So for those people who really are serious about change and not there about some of their damn gone ridiculous ideology, we need to weed those people out so we can actually focus on the change that has happened if we are actually moderate.